Welcome to the Vintage Ballers podcast. I'm your host, Brad Coreno. And on today's episode, we have Willie Burton joining the show. Willie played basketball at the University of Minnesota for the legendary Clem Haskins in the 80s before playing 8 years in the NBA, where he is also known for scoring 53 points in a game for the Philadelphia 76ers. So without further ado, please welcome Willie Burton. It's pretty interesting because I grew up back in the 80s and 90s, and you were one of the guys. I had an older brother that played basketball too, so he watched a lot of college basketball in the late 80s and the early 90s. So of course I knew you from your Minnesota days, and then I followed you as a kid all the way through your Miami days. I remember the 53-point game watching on ESPN, the highlights when I was a kid on SportsCenter and all that. So it's really cool to be able to interview you and a lot of these guys back from the 90s, because that's the era I grew up in. And Willie, a lot of people my age still, that's the era people just love, is that 80s, 90s era. And it was a, different game of basketball. And it was definitely a very physical brand of basketball. And I think people appreciated that.
That's true.
And,
very physical.
And of course, you coming from Detroit, my brother was in the class for the Fab Five in 91. And my brother was a leading scorer in the city of Cleveland back then. And of course, you had, his name is Brad Coreno. And he knew, Jimmy King, Jalen Rose, Weber, those guys. He had competed against them in AAU tournaments. So I heard about them way before the rest of the country did when I was a little kid. He kept saying these guys are phenomenal, and then having no idea they'd all team up at Michigan, of course. So, and then I heard names like Grant Long, Willie Burton, Steve Smith, Derek Coleman. There's so many guys from Michigan and that Detroit area that were studs back then. It was loaded with basketball talent and talent in general. So I wanted to kind of bring it back to your childhood, growing up in Detroit. And when did you fall in love with the game of basketball, and who were some of your favorite players?
I fell in love with the game of basketball probably in the 5th grade when I fell in love with it. I was introduced by my uncle Cleo. He used to take me with him. Any garden. I kind of loved everything. Anything that had to do with a ball, I loved it, to compete. I was the youngest of my cousins, so therefore I was on the losing end a lot. So you develop a competitive nature. Anyone that's younger, their siblings or anything like that. 5th grade, I really started to enjoy it. And I like the uniforms and all the other things that went along with that. So caught my eye.
And Willie, did you, growing up in Detroit, was the Pistons your favorite team, or do you have another team you rooted for?
No, at the time, the Pistons were my favorite team. The 76ers were my favorite team, and Los Angeles Lakers were my favorite team.
And
growing up as a kid, names like Dr. J with the Sixers, Detroit Pistons, Isaiah Thomas came to the team. So that brought a lot of who later be in mind. We had the same agent, and we did a lot of things, and I have his cell phone number, so I call him all the time. So it's pretty interesting.
That's very interesting. Yeah, I watched a documentary about the Pistons on how they kind of built that team, and I didn't realize the struggles Isaiah had in the first few years of his career. Obviously the Pistons weren't very good, and it was amazing watching what he went through. And then, of course, adding Joe Dumars and Lambeer and Rodman, all the other guys. But that was, and just the struggles they had just to get to the finals, not to mention win it. And it was, that was truly one of the most underrated teams in NBA history are those bad boy Pistons. And never, in my opinion, don't get enough credit. But you had an Eastern Conference, Willie, with obviously MJ, Barkley, and then the Sixers. You had the Celtics were a dynasty. You had to get through a lot of teams.
Yeah, back then you had to build your teams over time. It took time. You put pieces together, and you slowly climbed up, and you had an opportunity. But now with a lot of the control in the players' hands, they're making the decisions now based on teams. It's just interesting. It's just a little different, but times have changed.
They have changed. And when you were growing up and getting into high school, I know you won back-to-back state championships. I think it was 85 and 86. So, how did that, take us through those high school days and winning those state championships, and how did that help your game and help your confidence, going into Minnesota?
Well, it was the quality of players that I played with. When you went in, you didn't make varsity right away because it was Division I guys already there on the team. My school, St. Martin de Porres, it was a process. Very few individuals went to varsity right away. and I had to learn a skill set. It was different for me because I was 6'1" as a freshman, and then I went home, came back the next summer. I was 6'5".
Wow.
So I still had the guard skills, and ability, quickness, explosion, but yet my size dictated I needed to be in the paint. So I was my coach's first player that he really didn't know what to do with it. At first he told me, don't bring the ball down the floor, pass the ball to the guards. But then we got in the city championship, he told me to bring the ball down the floor. So I was running the point guard. So that was growing and expanding at that time. Guards were getting larger. And I'm playing with guys like Carl Collins, Blair Anderson, Brad Turner, Ben Morton. When I'm playing with guys like that were before me, they beat up on me, but I started adjusting pretty quick. We went to the semifinals the year before. Talking about building. We went to the semifinals the year before I won my first state championship. They graduated and then it was our turn. But I don't think they realized at that stage that they had prepared us. We had seen what it was like. We had a clear understanding of what it took. And then you add some more pieces, Keith Tucker, Scott Nichols, we had Damon Duncan, we had David Greenwood, who would rebound and block every shot in the world. So we had great role players. And it was a process. And then when you win it, you got to hold on to it because here they come. Mm-hmm. Guys are having career nights, against you. Guys never scored 15 points before us, having a 30-point night, hitting everything he's throwing up. So it's interesting.
Now, Willie, being that you were playing point guard back then at 6'5", did you ever kind of look at Magic Johnson as a kind of being that he's a 6'9" point guard? And back then that was kind of it wasn't really a thing back then. So did you ever look at and model any of your game after him as a point guard?
Some of it, using my body when I bring the ball down the floor, using the size of my body against a smaller point guard because a lot of them are quicker. So you have to be ready to pivot with your hip at a moment's notice. That I did get that from him. Keeping the ball here, and keeping the basketball player in between my elbow and my butt. As long as I can keep him there and I'm bringing the ball on the floor, the likelihood of him taking it from me is slim. I can't remember ever playing point guard and having the ball stripped from me.
Wow.
Because I used my body like Magic Johnson. I didn't think about it till you just said it.
Yeah, because I was wondering how that would be. Because back then, again, especially in the 80s and 90s, besides maybe Penny Hardaway and Magic, there really weren't many taller point guards. I mean, it was there was guys 6'1", 6'2", 5'11", but it wasn't a lot of 6'5" or 6'7" or 6'9" point guards. So I know when Penny came out, even he was kind of an anomaly back then. In the 90s, like no one had really seen that kind of athletic 6'7", almost like a Scottie Pippen at point guard. It was a very interesting dynamic. So, and you have that kind of body where you're 6'5", kind of lanky, and that's, again, back then you just didn't see that very often. So.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. And then later on, after I left Minnesota, I went to the Orlando Classic because they couldn't decide, where I was going to be drafted. I could have went anywhere from 20th to 5th, and it was like, what? That's a wide range. You know what I mean?
It's a wide range.
So I went to the Orlando Classic and I won an MVP at point guard against the nation's top point guards.
And who were some of the guys back then?
D. Brown, Travis Mays,
yep,
Phil Henderson from Duke, and my teammate Bimbo Coles. He
Bimbo
ended up being my teammate. Yeah. So I played point guard, and at that point it was like, oh yeah, he can bring the ball on the floor. But at Minnesota, I wasn't required to do that. I was required to play small forward because I was a good rebounder too, pretty good rebounder.
And Willie,
which I learned watching Richard Coffey also.
I was going to ask you about Minnesota because why did you choose Minnesota number 1? And obviously, I want to talk about the legendary coach Clem Haskins, and the impact he had in your career. If you can get into that as well.
I chose Minnesota because I really looked at the place. I'm gonna be honest with you with my coach, how it all happened. I wanted to go visit Pepperdine with one of my visits, just to go see the beach, just to go hang out in Malibu and think about what it would be like never see snow again.
Oh yeah, I love that campus. I've been there before.
Well, my coach decided that that's not what I was going to do. And he talked me actually into taking one of my recruiting visits because I was supposed to go to Michigan State.
Really?
That's where I was going to go. He talked me into taking my last recruiting visit, which was scheduled to go to Purdue and go to the University of Minnesota, where, as you know, Charlie Hallman, he was a player for my coach. Really? I don't know if you knew that.
No, I didn't know that.
Yes. So Charlie was there and Larry Ellis was there. So Charlie went to my high school.
I never knew that. Really? He's from Michigan. Okay.
Yeah. And I went up there and I went, I really went up there at the beginning just to say, okay, this is a visit. I'm enjoying myself. But I'm going to Michigan State. I went up there and I saw Minnesota and I saw the way people were living. I saw the fact that all the players remained and had jobs and had good lives. And they didn't just have jobs. They were at the top of companies and corporations, a great education system. It was just a different way of living that I had seen. It reminded me of the Detroit that I heard of growing up just before all of the things happened in the 80s. And some of the Detroit that I saw when people were working in plants and making a lot of money, people had. When that dried up, I saw it different. But when I went to Minnesota, that's what it reminded me of. These individuals here have jobs, corporations. And I thought about life after basketball. And Minnesota was a place that I wanted to be. When it's all said and done, I want to be like Al Nunes. I want to be like Corky Taylor. I want to be like all of these guys around here that's got these wonderful lives in these two big cities, these two massive cities. And the Gophers, they love their Gophers forever. It never dies.
And how did you, when you first met Coach Haskins and playing for him, what was that like? Because obviously he's a legendary figure in the Big Ten and in college basketball in general. And what was the experience playing for him and what did he teach you as a coach?
My experience playing for Coach Haskins was someone who knew the game, someone who understood me as a person, someone who would not allow me to fail. And it was like that with everyone. It wasn't just me. He wouldn't allow us to fail. I spent more time running at the top of Williams Arena because I wouldn't follow some directions that he had. Just to kind of give you an idea, I would run, me and some other teammates, I'm not going to name them, but I would run at 6 a.m. before class, and then we'd go to class, and then we'd come back and we run after class if we did something or violated a team rule. I only missed one game at the University of Minnesota because I missed one class.
Wow.
Not 2 classes, not 3, 1.
So Coach Haskins didn't mess around.
He did not play. He did not play, but we needed that.
Yeah.
And a lot of what he taught us shapes who we are today. If you look at my teammates, we're all doing very well. We all have our degrees. I think we're the only team, our team is the only team at the University of Minnesota where all players have their degrees.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Wow. That I know of. Maybe there's some more that came after, but when I went back to get my degree in 2013, when I finished my degree, that's what they said.
That's incredible.
The entire team has their degree.
And that's definitely an honor to Coach Haskins. I remember growing up and watching him on the sideline. You can just tell people who are more disciplinarian and people who you could just tell, and he was one of those guys. He reminded me like a John Thompson or a guy that's just not going to mess around, but he's going to get the most out of his players. And I always find it interesting with Minnesota too, because I believe you guys had it's like almost like a stage. Your court is kind of, yeah. And that was one of the most unique things to watch as a kid because it just looks so different than any other place you would watch.
Yeah, the barn. I love the barn. Yep. And it gets loud in there because the roof is so close. So if it gets going there, there's no way for sound to go but down. I can remember a lot of games we would have to come in the locker room and we would just take a minute because our ears would be ringing.
Oh my God. So that loud. What is your favorite experience? Do you have one game that sticks out to you about playing at home?
the turnaround game against Iowa, my junior year. We turned it around. We turned it on and didn't turn it off. Iowa was nationally ranked. We beat them. Then we later went on to beat the #1 team, Illinois, and they were calling us giant killers. So that was exciting. It was an exciting time in Minnesota.
And you guys made it to an Elite Eight, didn't you?
Yeah.
That's what I thought. And a Sweet 16. Yeah. Yeah, I do. Yeah. Yep. And you got, I mean, I think there was like Kevin Lynch, Mario Max, Marion Maxey. There's a ton of guys in that team that made it to the NBA. I think 5 or 6 guys you played with made it to the,
Bob Martin, Kevin Lynch, Walter Bond, Richard Coffey, Melvin Newbern. Yeah, 6 of us on that team.
Wow. That's incredible. And looking
you
back.
should have started practices.
I can't imagine how competitive that must have been. I mean, and Willie, playing against those guys before you made it to the NBA, we'll get to your NBA days in a second here, but that must have really toughened you up as, you know, playing against 5 of the guys that made it to the NBA, you know, on the same team. I mean, that you're going to have, I mean, it's not like playing at a smaller college where you're competing against guys who probably aren't going to go there, but you're competing against, you know, and not just the guys in your own team, but the Big Ten talent back then, which was always loaded with a lot of talent. So you're constantly playing against NBA caliber players. So, you know, you're going into the NBA with that moxie and that experience.
Well, I could say this much: playing against Terry Mills, Glenn Rice, Jay Edwards, Danny Jones, you go to Purdue and say Todd Mitchell, go to Ohio State, say Dennis Hopson. You say, I mean, we can go on and on and on and name names for days across the Big Ten. It was pretty much a small version of the NBA.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm just, and if you looked at the guys, for the most part, most people played more than a year in the NBA,
mm-hmm.
you know, or at least a year. And for me, I was able to really open up and do a lot more things in the NBA. That the college game, come out of the college structure and really use my ability and my talents to do different things and be more free and play with the ball a lot more, you know, because there were isolations. You know, that was back when no one can help you. It was you and that man. And if you couldn't defend them, it was going to be a long night, you know? I got a chance to play with a bunch of young guys, you know. Steve Smith came on the team. So it was interesting. I'll tell you that much. It was a lot easier than I thought it was going to be, to me. And I'm not saying that just to be saying it, but I mean, I had 25 points in my first game. You know?
I didn't know that. Really?
Yeah. So, and that record stood until LeBron came and broke that when he joined the Miami Heat. I had the record for most points scored by a Heat player in his first game, and I had the record for most points scored against the Miami Heat. But I like to tell people that, you know, that was my first actual NBA game. That was LeBron's like 7th year or something.
Oh, exactly. He was already a star by then. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's incredible. And I didn't realize that, you know, first of all, I didn't know about that record, you know, the 25 points in your first game. And I knew about scoring. I always thought it was funny how you scored that 53 against Miami, you know, your former team. But, and then you mentioned guys like Dennis. I had Dennis on the show, actually, Dennis Hopson, and he's still the leading scorer of Ohio State. All these years later, still the, you know, all-time leading scorer. And, you know, I had another one of your teammates, Dana Barros, on the show. And I've had a lot of these guys.
Dana.
Oh yeah, Dana's a great guy. Yep. And
we both had 50 points that same year.
Yeah, you did.
He had 50. Yeah.
And I think Dana made the All-Star team that year, if I remember correctly. Yeah.
He used to give and I hate to put him out here. Kenny, he used to get Kenny, the NBA commentator. That was, you know, everyone has a guy that you have nightmares with. You know, for me, it was James Worthy, because James Worthy was 2 inches taller than I was, well, 1.5 inches taller than me, and he moved like I was, but he was bigger. So facing that's the only time I faced anything like that, you know. But Kenny, he said it on TNT one time also. He said he said it on TV. His nightmare was Dana Barros. There was nothing he could do with Dana.
And Dana was quick. Oh, Dana was ahead of his time in some ways. A lot of those point guards back then, I mean, you know, because he would fit in this era perfectly with the way he could shoot and the way he could move, and, you know, and he'd
average 50. He'd average 50 in this era because he's small. You know, think about a small guy then when the game was that physical.
I don't know how he did it. I mean, some of these guys back then, like you said, and going against a James Worthy, you had tons of guys like, those bigger power forward, and you had all the centers were huge back then, and everybody would.
I want to tell you how we did it in Philadelphia. You want to tell you how we did it?
Yeah, how did you do it?
Scott Williams, Sharon Wright, Tim Perry setting all those screens. So Scott was setting the screens for Michael Jordan. So, I mean, getting him the shots. So he got us a lot of shots. I want to say thank you, Scott Williams.
Yeah, did you guys have Spoon Man too? Clarence Weatherspoon?
Yeah, we had Spoon. Spoon would set the screens, but we gave Spoon the ball most of the time when he set the screens.
Yep, I remember
because
that.
He put his back to the basket. He was he could levitate.
Oh, I know.
Witherspoon could levitate. I don't know how he got all of that weight off. He and Charles Barkley, well, I would say Charles Barkley, Larry Johnson. Those guys at that height and that weight, they were really massive. They could get that weight up off the ground. They had a 40-inch vertical. You know what I mean?
Incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned Barkley. A lot of the younger generation doesn't realize how great he was. I mean, I saw him play, obviously, and you guys played against him, but I mean, he was a true superstar back then, and people don't realize how great of a player he really was. I know he gets, because his commentary, everybody knows him from that. The younger generation does. They don't know the player Charles Barkley. And I was telling my nephews, I'm like, he was a hell of a player. I mean,
he was.
Oh, and he was in his prime. Watch out. Great player.
Very powerful.
And I wanted to talk about those early Heat teams you played on, because I always thought there was so much potential there. I know it never really panned out, but you had the Grant Longs and Bimbo Coles, Glenn Rice, Ronnie Cycli. You guys had Sherman Douglas. I mean, you had a lot of young talent on that team. Steve Smith, you mentioned. What do you think it could have been if you guys could have stuck together, maybe developed together? And, what are some of your best memories? I think you guys made the playoffs in 92 or 93?
Yeah, we made it in 92, 93, and 94.
Oh, okay. I realized you made all four. Okay. Or all three.
Yeah.
I remember your series against Chicago.
The thing about having a young team is you got to have some veterans in there. That's the one thing. You got to have some older guys in there that's keeping everybody kind of together. Because what happens is you have a lot of scorers, and poor Ron Cycli at times, he might not see the ball, but he's a great player too, right?
Mm-hmm, he is.
But he wouldn't see the ball, I'm just saying.
Who were your two or three go-to guys back then?
Our two go-to guys were Steve and Glenn. That was 1 and 2.
Okay.
After that, it pretty much was me. I was the type of player that I could score off the bench. I can score the play. I can score. I didn't need any plays. Glenn and Steve were our guys, and everybody else was after them, like I said, I didn't have a problem. I come off the bench and average 12. I could get 12 points in 12 minutes, from a tip in, a steal, hit a couple shots, I found other ways to score in the game without getting in their way. You know what I mean? Because they were great players. Now, they weren't good. They were great. And that's just the bottom line to it. And I found a way of scoring, so I came off the bench. Actually, it was better for me. I was starting at first, but we didn't have any power coming off the bench. So you placed me with Harold Miner. But so it wasn't enough shots out there. So.
I'm gonna say you guys have a lot of guys who wanted to, and then Sherman and Bimbo and all those other guys. You had a lot of, there was a lot of quality guys in that team. And I feel it's one.
But when you bring in Brian Shaw was
Brian Shaw.
Yep, he was the distributor. But you got 4 guys out there who want the ball. You know what I mean?
And what about Grant Long?
4 guys out there that want the ball.
Well, what about Grant Long? How did he fit in? Because it seemed like he was kind of a dirty work.
Was a great workhorse.
Yeah.
Grant Long was a screen setter, a rebounder. He did all the dirty things. He could score too, but he gave up his scoring. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Grant Long would give up his scoring. To me, this is my, without being a scorer, he was the most underrated power forward that I had seen. And his size wasn't that, Grant's an inch taller than me.
I was gonna say he wasn't that big, yeah.
Yeah, he's going against guys 7 foot and 6'9" and 6'11", and he's handling them.
Wow.
He's playing smart. He's taking his time. He's going to set a screen for you every time. He's going to do his job. He's probably one of the biggest unsung guys on that Miami Heat team to me, because if everyone looks at points, well, he set the screens for us to get us points. You know, he got us open.
You're right. He was underneath doing the dirty work, and he had a long NBA career too. He didn't just last a few years. He was in there for, I think, over a decade. He played in the NBA. Because I remember he played for the Pistons.
15 years.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. He was definitely, he was one of those unsung players of the 90s that not a lot of people talk about. When you look back at some of the teams he was on, he was always a quality player on the team he was. I remember the Pistons teams with Grant Hill. You know, he was on those a couple of years of those teams, and then you know, guys like him and Don Reed and some of the guys they had there. And they had those tough-minded guys underneath to help out, you know, Grant and Lindsey Hunter and the other guy, and you know, Allen Houston. But yeah, you're right. That another play out. That whole team. That when I look at that roster, the Miami roster, every one of those guys, including yourself, went on to have nice careers. I mean, that was a very solid roster. It's just a shame we couldn't have seen what could have happened if you know, guys could have gelled together as one team. But it's one of those, you know, it's kind of like the Golden State Warriors back then with Sprewell and Owens and Weber and all those guys. You know, we'll never know what could have happened. But it was you guys had one of the most interesting young teams in the league back then by far.
Yeah, we had firepower.
You did.
We had firepower. We just didn't understand how to use it. You know, we didn't understand how to use it. You know, if we knew then what we know now, people have a lot of problems. Mm-hmm. You know, but you're young, you know, and everybody's trying to shine and everybody wants to kind of get in there, and then sometimes guys bump heads because they're young, you know. But the one thing I can say about professional sports is what's underestimated is the the power of the outsiders. The power of the outsiders will do more damage to a team than the team members will themselves.
And what do you mean by that? Describe the.
It could be family, friends, associates. Gotcha. Everybody's giving their opinions on what they think, but they're telling you what you think you need to hear to make you happy.
Gotcha.
You know, they want to see you do well. So they may say, well, why did he pass you the ball right here? He should have did that right there. And after a while, you sit up there listening, you might get to believing it because you're young. You don't know that much. You're thinking, you know, you might take it the wrong way. You know, I saw a lot of that happening when I was in Miami.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a great point about that. That's something that guys like us, the casual fan, wouldn't know.
Yeah. But we were young. I mean, we all had our issues. We all had our issues because we were young.
Yep.
You know?
And you look back at that era in the early to mid 90s, Willie, there was a lot of young, I mean, because, you know, Jordan and the Bulls got all the attention in the East and sort of the Knicks. But you had a lot of young upcoming teams with Charlotte, with Zoe and Muggsy and LJ, and then you guys, and you had Orlando with Shaq and Penny. And I mean, there's a lot of great up and coming teams. They never panned out, but you always wonder what could have happened if some of those teams would have stayed together, because they all went on to have great careers. And obviously, we know what Shaq did in LA, and you know, but you guys had to face. It wasn't just the Bulls. I mean, there was a lot of good young teams at that time.
Yeah, some of the greatest games I'm going to say to you was that battle in Florida, Orlando versus Miami. Those were some battles. You hear me?
And Willie, what was
Shaq hadn't fully found himself yet.
I was going to ask you, what was he
still
like?
Doing damage, but he hadn't fully found himself yet. Then you had Nick Anderson.
Dennis
you had
Scott.
him. You had Bowie. You had. I mean, those were some heck of a battles. You hear me? Some heck of a battles.
And who did you on those teams? I mean, you get to obviously Penny and all those guys, but who was the toughest matchup that you had to like defensively?
Nick Anderson. It was just like the Big Ten. It was like transferring from the Big Ten.
Yep.
Here we are going, you know, against each other a lot of the times. But a lot of times who I had to defend also, sometimes you had to, I couldn't help. I used to love going to sneak behind guys and block shots. I couldn't do that with shooter.
Dennis Scott.
Dennis Scott.
Yep. I
couldn't do that against Dennis Scott. So that enabled, be honest with you, I'm just going to say this. Dennis Scott enabled Shaq to start to develop faster, because when he was on the floor, you had to watch your rotation, because you got Dennis and Nick out there, both capable of shooting threes like water. So that changed the complexity of our ability to double Shaquille.
And Willie, do you think, looking at that team specifically, do you think if Shaq would have stayed there and Penny never got injured, do you think there's no doubt they win a championship, or do you still think there would have been they're missing a piece?
They were facing some of the same struggles we were. Being young, people watching this can understand what I'm saying. There's so many things that you look at that's really not that important, but when you're young, you think it is.
Mm-hmm. Yep. You're right. Yeah, because I always wondered what happened to some. I mean, just when you look at that, how dynamic Shaq and Penny were, and again, that's something that a lot of the younger kids never saw. They hear about Shaq and Kobe, rightfully so. Shaq and Kobe were incredible, but Shaq and Penny at that time, I mean, there was nothing like that. A big man who was just so physically dominant, and then a 6'7" point guard who could pretty much do everything on the court. You know, and then you, like you said, they had the shooters, and you had the Donald Royals and the Anthony Booys. I mean, they had that was a great team. It really was.
It was a great structure, just like our structure. It was perfect for Shaquille, because if you take Nick Anderson out, you take Dennis Scott out, you could replace it with any other player. I let you pick somebody. He would not have had the same impact at that age, because he hadn't fully gotten himself. He hadn't fully gathered everything. He was good. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to take it away from him, but he wasn't the super dominant Shaquille O'Neal that he would later become.
Yep. And I think we saw that when he played the Dream in the finals. And obviously he had the size on Dream, and he would just, physically dominate him on the offensive end, but he had no answer for Dream on the defense. And Shaq would be the first to admit it. He says, I couldn't cover Dream. And Dream kind of exposed him as that young kid, didn't, and it was a sweep. I mean, people forget they swept him, and Dream was we know how great Dream was. I had multiple teammates of his on the show, and they said, you'll never see anything quite, I mean, his footwork was impeccable, and he pretty much had point guard moves in a 6'11", 7-foot body. So how do you guard that? But yeah, that was the first time I think Shaq really got exposed. The young Shaq, of course, the old, the prime Shaq was a different story, but young Shaq still had a lot to learn. He said Dream, that series taught him a lot about, being a center and how to have more finesse and how to, because I mean, Dream was pulling stuff on him. I mean, he was doing all those fadeaway jumpers and 3-pointers, and I've never seen anything like that. Dream was just schooling everybody that year. I think it was Robinson he took to school, and the year before Ewing, and Dream was definitely, he was a different kind of cat.
So I'll give you a scenario about me right now. My block moves that I did even in college, my block moves are a combination of Akeem Olajuwon and Kevin McHale.
Really? And McHale's another one people forget how great of a low post player he was.
That's where my block moves come from.
Interesting.
Up and under. Kevin McHale he always has 3 ways to shoot the ball. He always has it. You take this, he's got that. You take this, even off of a pivot. And I went, wow, you talk about an arsenal. Because you can come down, get a guy, drop step him and put it in. The next time, he's not gonna let you do that. You get the ball, you drop step, pump fake, he's in the air, shoot a hook shot. Then he goes for that. Here's the third one. You drop step, pump fake, step through like you're gonna do the hook shot, then turn around and shoot the fadeaway off the glass. Kevin, you up and jumping, and you don't know where you're going.
There's nothing you could do about it. And
exactly. And I say, I want to do that right there.
And Will, that's interesting. It was Olajuwon and McHale, and those are 2 heck of guys to model your game after. And I remember, like, back then, and again, it's a different game now. So some of the younger fans listening, they might not understand how low, the low post presence back then, that was everything. You had to have most of the dominant teams besides the Bulls, really. They were one of the few teams that didn't have a low post presence that could really dominate. But every other great team, you had the Lakers with Kareem, you had Ewing and the Knicks, you had Robinson and the Spurs, Dream and Rocket, go on and on. They all had a low post presence. You really couldn't survive unless you had MJ and Scotty without that low post presence. So, that was interesting. And you got to play, Willie, your first couple years in the league, you got to play against Magic and Worthy and against, Larry and McHale and those guys, because that was right at the end of their careers. So what was that like, playing against some of the guys I'm sure you idolized growing up?
That was cool. It was fun watching Larry Bird talk stuff when he shoot the ball. Like,
as he's shooting.
Yeah, as he's shooting. Oh, Willie, that's good. First of all, I was happy that you know my name, but
I love it. That had to be incredible, because watching those guys, I mean, Magic and Bird and the Celtics, Lakers, I mean, those are 2 of the greatest dynasties of all time. And to be able to compete against them, even though they're at the end of their career, but to compete against them at the highest level, that had to be pretty awesome for a young kid like you.
Yeah, that was awesome. It was, because you watched them, growing up, and and you're out there on the floor with them, and Kevin McHale is cheating off of his man so he can sneak and block my shot and tell me about it. It was like my first game against the Boston Celtics. It was like, this is what I learned. This is something you don't know about the NBA. I don't know if it still goes on now, but when a player comes out of your school and you're playing against them, you want them to do well, but you're going to pick on them. You're going to pick on them. And that's what Larry and Kevin did to me my first game against them. I mean, they were just talking smack to me. Kevin left his man to come block my shot. He completely left his man. And I was like, because at the time, when was weird about when I got in the NBA, I was never asked to pass. My whole career, I was never asked to pass the ball. And that was different. But so Kevin sneaks over, and at them long arms, he blocks a shot. Then he tells me, Willie, because back then you could taunt and talk all kind of stuff back then. This is before the no taunting rule. Willie, get that stuff out of here. And I'm sitting up here, I'm young, I'm just sitting up here like, these two of my idols, I don't even know how to respond. You know what I'm saying? I'm just sitting up here looking like, hey man, these guys really know me. I'm like,
I would have been the same way.
I got my ball thrown 3 stories up in the crowd.
And Willie, when you look back at NBA history with Bird, McHale, and Chief, where do you put them as far as the greatest front courts of all time?
They have to be 1 and 2 with Magic and Magic Worthy and
Kareem.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was
Worthy and Kareem.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. I mean, there's not.
And I would put them 2 because and I know I like Chief. I love Chief to death. Chief knows. I told Chief I wore 00 in middle school because of him.
Oh, really?
So, yeah, I told him that. Yeah. So it was like, so you get the chance, man, to talk to all these guys you watched growing up. You get to talk to them, man, and sit around and talk. And me, of course, I be scoring so many buckets. So I they'll talk to me because, sometimes they may, look at you or talk to you and say, hey, that'll be nice. But I scored a lot of points. So a lot of times they give me a little bit more time. But I talk to them like a little kid, still to this day.
And Willie, what was it like playing against the Bad Boy Pistons?
Physical. Very physical. Very, very, very physical. And I knew it was a mental physical because they weren't really trying to fight. They were just trying to throw you off your game. But then again, I had watched them. Growing up as a kid. So as they hit me and knock me around, I just get up and laugh and smile. And they was talking too.
I was going to say they had to be.
Oh yeah, their whole thought process was to get you out of your game, And I knew what time it was. It was like, y'all gonna just eat. I'll stay at the free throw line. That's up to y'all. I already know how it goes. So when I go in, make the shot, I'm balling up. I know it's coming. You can tell they like you because they never knock me on my back. When they knock you on your back, that's when they don't like you. But other than that, they're just going to give you a hard foul.
Okay. Yeah, welcome you to the NBA.
And I knew that.
Yep.
Yeah, I knew that.
I want to take it back to your 53-point game and kind of take us through that game. And is it one of those games, Willie, where you just knew from the get-go, yeah, I'm going to be on tonight and no one's going to stop me? Or was it something that kind of came throughout the game? Like, how did you feel in the first quarter?
I think that's the first time I put 4 quarters together like that. Like I said, I'm known I could score 12 points in 12 minutes. That's not unusual for me. But I put 4 quarters together like that, And the way the game was going, they couldn't double me. And I was hot. So typically when I get hot, I was double teamed in the NBA from my 5th game until I left. I was double teamed when I catch the ball in my hand. But the way that game was going, they couldn't double. It was just weird. I don't know if I can say it was just like everything was aligned, I would catch the ball and they would be out of place. And I better get this shot off before they get out here. It's kind of like that. And then I knew the second thing which gave me an advantage in that game specifically was I knew what every player's strength was. I knew who could move laterally, who couldn't move laterally. I knew who who would go for the first step. I know who I could shoot the ball quick on, that I could get the shot off before they block it. I kind of understood them because I had just practiced against them.
Mm-hmm.
You know? So I kind of use that. And again, those screens from Scott and Sharon and Sean Bradley.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Tim Perry, Witherspoon, those screens, and Dana passing the ball. I mean, it was just like everywhere I went, they had a screen for me. It was like all the plays were broken. It was like, get him the ball, get him a screen.
Yeah,
he's on.
I mean, it's got to be, because how many players, think about it, how many players have scored 50 points in an NBA game? Not many, throughout the history of the NBA. So to know that you're one of those guys, I mean, that must, not only is it a good feeling, but it must be that's a pretty, memorable moment in anybody's career. But to score 50 in an NBA game, not to mention a high school game or any other, level, but that's just something that I'm sure you'll never forget. And again, I remember watching it on SportsCenter the next morning.
Here's something to think about. Michael Jordan did that all the time. Do you know how exhausted I was after that 53-point game? Michael Jordan, George Gervin, all these great scorers, they do that easy night in and night out. I mean, that takes a lot. And more than anything, once I did that, and I was like, man, I don't know how they do it. I don't know how you do it. How can you get 50 the next night? I mean, we played Reggie Miller the following game, I think. I think I had like 28. There's no way I hadn't fully recovered from the game before to even think about getting 50. I didn't have the strength. I'm just being honest with you. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm sitting up, how do these guys do this night in and night out, 40, 40, 40, 40? You know how hard that is?
Oh, I can't imagine, especially back then when it was physical. And I mean, there was, people were checking you, and I mean, there was hand checking. I mean, it was just a different game back then. And I remember, I'm trying to think who was on. I had so many players in that era on the show, but I can't remember who was telling me just how physical it was. Oh, it was Ricky Pierce, and Ricky was telling me just in the 80s and 90s how physical it was, and just to get off a shot sometimes. I mean, it wasn't, and he was like, you would just be beat up by the time at the end of the games, like you're saying. And he played on those Bucks teams in the 80s, and of course those Sonics teams. And he's like, it was a physical game.
I'll give you an example to take a look at before you even get open. Did you see how they show a lot of Michael Jordan and Reggie Miller? Mm-hmm. Do you see them wrestling and battling and hitting each other? You're hitting each other. Then you're going to go off a screen. One, somebody's going to hit you. Then the second screen, somebody's going to hit you. That's on offense and defense. Because if my man screens you, I'm going to hit your man to slow him down. So both players are getting hit twice before you even catch the ball, and and you're wrestling first.
I mean, it's just, I remember watching some of those Bulls-Pacers playoff games, Willie, and watching Reggie try to get a shot off at the end, and he would hit some of those big shots. We know how great Reggie was, but you're right. It was a struggle. He'd be pushing people off, and I mean, and he wasn't a big guy. He was a skinnier guy, and he had to be tough as nails to do what he did.
Yeah, he did. Reggie was a heck of a player, man. Heck of a player. Skinny, but very efficient, very effective. And he had those Davis brothers screens.
Yep. Oh yeah, those boys. Yep. Big Davis brothers and Smiths and Derek McKee, and they had a squad over there. I mean, there's no doubt about it.
The guys were much bigger too. They were Kevin Duckworth. He might be 7 foot 320. You know what I mean? Huge. I mean, just ridiculous, just huge guys. So when you run into them, and I'm not going to take anything away from these guys nowadays, they're slimmer. But when you hit those guys, man, I can remember a couple of times hitting guys literally and coming off of my feet they twist you. You get twisted a lot from those screens. Bam, like hitting a wall. And you had to maintain your footing and keep going.
I mean, you mentioned Kevin Duckworth. I remember his teammate Jerome Kersey, how big Kersey was. He was they were big boys, man. They weren't messing around. I mean, you look at a lot of Charles Oakley, Anthony Mason. I had Anthony Mason's son on the show. And, those are some physical big boys. And Willie, when one of the other questions I had for you, since you played in the 90s and played against MJ and those Bulls teams, how do you, where do you look at MJ in the GOAT conversation? And where do you put him, just as far as guys you had to face, is he by far the best player you faced?
He's by far the best player I've ever faced. Without a doubt. It's not even a question about that. I don't think, that's an even argument.
Yeah.
Where the GOAT conversation comes in is where when you look at other aspects and other players. And I don't know, Rick Barry said something that rung a bell. You really have to do it by position. You can't just say one player. Because if you really look at it, if you look at all the accomplishments, really Kareem is there.
Mm-hmm.
You look at the other accomplishments, you say, well, winning. Well, Bill Russell. So that throws Mike, those guys aren't even close. I mean, if you really look at it that way, you got 11, then you got a guy with 6, and then you look at all Kareem's accomplishment, leading score. I think he almost got more assists than Mike. He got all kind of statistics, you know what I mean? But the greatest player I ever played against is Michael Jordan, from that I can remember, and it's pretty clear. It's not even an argument. But when you talk about that GOAT conversation, and then you look at a guy like Wilt, where they actually changed the rules because he was Shaquille O'Neal before Shaquille O'Neal came along, But the thing about Wilt, what people don't understand, Wilt would bench press like 500-600 pounds. He was a sprinter. He could run. He could high jump. He was a high jumper at 7 foot. So with that kind of strength, that kind of ability, and that kind of leaping ability, there was nothing on the planet during his time could even stay with him. So dominance for a period of time, sheer dominance. I think Wilt dominated the game longer than Mike did, even though he didn't win any rings. So it's
You make some great points. I think I agree with you. When everybody gets into those GOAT conversations, I kind of, because I'm from Cleveland, so I saw LeBron here for many years. I grew up watching him play in high school. And they're, him and Jordan are great in different ways. They're not necessarily, they're just, so I don't really compare them and say, well, he's better than look, I would start a team with either one of them and I'd probably win, multiple championships, and Kobe's another one. And we can go on the list, they're great players. It's hard to really compare, like you said, especially when you have different positions. How do you compare Shaq or Dream to Jordan? It's completely different positions, and it's just, you're right.
Well, with LeBron, this is the difference with LeBron. Where LeBron has cemented himself, and this is why you have to separate him. When you look at the greatest all-around player, is LeBron. Mm-hmm. That's what I mean. They all have their own kind of specialties and lanes. You can't just say one person. LeBron, the big O was that guy. Okay? Look at this guy. You know what I mean?
Look at this guy.
Yeah. Yeah, look at this guy. So, greatest all-around player is LeBron James, Oscar Robertson second.
And the big O. Nobody ever talks about the big O. And just look at his statistics. Look what he did.
Yeah, and that's a heck of a feat. Now, when you talk about the type of player like that, I'm going to be honest with you. When it comes down to it, what type of player would you rather play with?
Personally, I'd rather play if it was MJ or LeBron. I'd rather play with LeBron just because you're gonna get the ball more. He's more of a distributor.
You're gonna get your shots off. This is something people don't think about. I'll say this, and maybe this will help everyone else understand if you're a player. I want to play with MJ because he will win too. But if MJ making all the shots, when my contract year come up, guess what's gonna happen with my pay? It's gonna go down. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I got a ring. Because I got a ring doesn't mean another team's gonna give me a whole lot more money. It just doesn't work like that. People think it works like that. But if you don't have some numbers, you don't have some productivity, and you don't have things like that as far as your career, that's why a lot of people wanted to join Mike toward the end of their career. Think about it. Yeah, a lot of stars joined Mike toward the end of their career.
Ron Harper and Rodman, those guys, yeah.
Toward the end of their careers.
That's a great point. Yeah, because I think if I'm looking to win in that season, I'm taking MJ just because he's never lost in the finals and just everything about him. To me, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think he's the greatest competitor. I put him right up there with anybody in any sport in the history. It's just what I've seen in the last 35 years since I've been around. I haven't seen anything like that. He's just an ultra.
Did you know him in his first book?
Oh, are you really?
Mm-hmm.
No, I didn't know that.
Me and Glenn Rice for Trash Talkers. We found out the hard way also.
Yeah, so take us to that story.
Oh man, we were playing good. You know, I could get going. Man, Glenn and I, if we get going, that Michigan and us come out, we're not only throwing the ball in the basket, but we letting you know about it too. You know, wrong. Shouldn't have did that with MJ. He can play to a level that you have to go, I can't get there. That's all I got. You can't browbeat yourself and be like, I'm going to do this next time, and next time I'm going to do that, and I'm going to go over here and do this, and I'm going to stop him from doing that. No, it's not going to happen. So he leaps so high. I had a 27-inch vertical at 6'7.5", 6'8", which means I can get pretty much, you know, when he does that spin move and he cocks back and he jumps, I can remember vividly one time having my hand up. And my hand was at its like down here. It was nowhere in his face or anything. It was down here. And I was like, did that happen when I just think it happened? So he came down another time, he did the same move again. And I put my hand up and I said, my hand is where I thought it was. I just let my hand down because it wasn't doing anything. The hand's supposed, they say hand in the face. What was the hand in the chest?
And did you, Willie, when you guarded him, did you have any idea? I mean, we know some of his basic moves, but I mean, he had so many counters. Did you just guess and hope that you got it right? Or how did you guard someone like that?
The only way that you guard him the best you can. Mike had one weakness. Nobody knew about it. I don't understand why more teams didn't expose it. Mike had one weakness. He had a problem defending bigger players on the block.
Really?
If you go up and look at that move Steve Smith did when he went around him and dunked on him.
Yeah. Huh.
I used to get the ball every time. And I used to tell him, look, man, just post him up. Mike don't like he's not great. He's not great post defense. He's a gambler. He's going to swing. And I had Akeem the Dream and Kevin McHale. And Mike did his thing to me on the other end. I mean, he did whatever he wanted to do. When I had him on the block, it was nothing, you know, I'm not trying to, but I was so successful at it that they had a scheme they would do. After he fouled me the second time and looked like he was going to get a foul trouble, they would sub him out the game and sub him back in on somebody else.
Who would come on you? Pippen or somebody else?
Probably Pippen, probably Scott. Yep. Scott. But they play a different, they play championship style defense. And once you kind of get used to that, actually you can use it against them because they're going to gamble. They're going to gamble, force, and push themselves. You let them push themselves and go right around them. If you look at most of the times I caught the ball, I never looked up. I catch the ball, look at the floor, and look at their feet. Whichever foot is up, I just go right around them every time. Because if you stand up, they're aggressive. They're going to grab the ball. They may grab your hand, but the referee's not going to call. I found that out early. So I went, okay, I can't let them get their hands on the ball because they're going to get the advantage because they've been around longer. You know, I need to protect the ball. And I noticed that they gambled. And that's how I would score. And it wasn't really, to be honest with you, it wasn't really that hard after that, you know?
That's interesting. You mentioned the low post on Jordan because I never really heard that before, but I never thought about it. How that would be the one spot because there had to be, everyone has some weakness. And that was
his weakness.
Yeah.
It wasn't I'm not going to say a weakness, but depending, you could really take advantage. If you were a block scorer with some good moves and you post him up and you get him, he wants to get physical and do things like this, and you don't focus on that. You let when he shove away. That's the same thing Steve Smith did. When he get to doing this and you use it against him, you're gone. You know, putting the ball in the hole. He's a competitor though. He's not going to let me. I know this much. He would never let me score on him 3 times in a row. Mm-hmm. He fouled me intentionally. So being a competitor is like you said, and he fouled you hard too.
Oh, I bet. And,
Yeah.
and what about Scotty? Like, what kind of, was he a better overall defender than MJ, or were they different type of defenders?
Scotty was like, and Scotty was like a symphony out there on the basketball court, like a symphony. Imagine how Mike could do the dunks and do other things to come up with a steal. Scotty would do everything. Scotty would give the pass. Scotty could block a shot. Scotty could get a steal. Scotty was everywhere, everywhere, you know? And it was easy to him. He just had a knack for doing all the things necessary that everybody else wasn't doing.
I mean,
he carried a lot of weight. He picked up a lot of slack on the team, a lot of times.
I mean, Willie, when I look back at that duo, you know, because again, MJ gets a lot of the credit, obviously, and rightfully so. He's, you know, he's arguably one of the greatest players of all time, and just, you know, he was an incredible phenomenon. But Scotty, there's so many, like you said, the little things. I always watch when he would pick up Magic full court in the finals, you know, things like that that changed that series. I mean, I think I don't know if it was Magic or someone said that when Scotty picked him up, that kind of changed the dynamic of that whole series, because then they weren't getting into their offense as much, and it was tough for them to get set up. And I mean, it was wearing, you know, Magic was a little bit older then, so it wasn't like a young Magic. So, and Scotty was 6'7", so he could stay with Magic. It wasn't like he was a small guy. And
yeah, Scotty's 6'7", but Scotty got arms of a 7-footer. That's what everybody don't realize. Scotty's arms are like ridiculously long. I got long arms. Scotty's arms are like, I mean, it's like, man, how you get those arms, man? It might come down to his knees, you know?
Well, one of the things I want to ask you about, because you played against those two, let's take the 96 Bulls with Rodman, Ron Harper, you know, those guys. How do you think they would have defended like a Steph Curry and Klay Thompson?
You can't say that because the rules were different.
True. So let's say it was the same rules as back in the 90s.
They wouldn't get all the shots that they're getting like that, number one, because remember, you could hand check and other things. They wouldn't. I'm not saying that they wouldn't be great and they wouldn't be good. I'm not saying that at all. But to score is much more difficult, you know, in those rules. Now, if you take, you know, Klay and Steph's rules and put them against Mike and Scotty, they kill them, because those guys relied on physicality in their game. When you take all that physicality away, you're exposed. Keep in mind, they're older too, so the game is faster. They're going to move. They're going to tire out quicker. You know,
that's a great point. Yeah.
So you can't really, because it'd be unfair to both of them.
Yeah, it really is dependent on the rules, like you said. That's a great point, because I mean, it is such a different game today, and there's no hand checking. It's not as physical. I know it's still physical to some degree, but not like that. So, you know,
nowhere near as physical, man. I mean, on a block, when I could put my forearm in you and my hand in you and chuck your waist, trust me, the center of your body is everything. If somebody can chuck you, they throw you off. You can't move. You can't get into your move. You can't get a rhythm. You know, it's a completely different game. And guarding from the point guard position, that means they could do it the whole way down the floor. Not Steph can't do this, you know? But I love Ron Harper, and I was just with him, and I love the rest of them guys. Try to stay with these guys without touching them, you know? So it's unfair, really, you know, to try to put one in the other, because it's different games.
Yeah, it is. No, that's a great answer. And I was wondering, I always loved hearing what, you know, some of the older players say about this new generation, and then vice versa. And of course they respect them and they say they're great players, but it's just a different, like you said, a different era and different rules. And it means that was 25 years ago. We're talking, you know, the Bulls team. So it was a very different game back then. But yeah, I agree with you, everything you said. I think if you go back to the 90s, you bring this Golden State team to the 90s, the Bulls kill them. And I think if you bring that Bulls team to this era, Golden State kills them. I think it's that simple.
There'd be a lot of injuries if you bring them to the Golden State era.
No, I totally agree. And I think too, now I've heard people say that MJ would have adapted and learned how to shoot threes. And I'm sure he would have. I mean, I don't doubt anything MJ would have done that, but Steph is such a natural three-point, and Klay and Steph are such natural three-point shooters, and they have such quick releases, and they're just so dynamic that way, that I think if you had the Bulls in this era, even if MJ learned how to shoot that 3-point shot, I just don't see anybody on that Bulls team that could keep up with Steph and Clay and some of the other guys they have that can shoot that 3 and hit it as well as they can.
I tell you, there's only one player without question could play in both eras. LeBron.
Mm-hmm. It's true. Yeah.
He's the only player without question could play in both eras. Physically, he's a physical monstrosity.
Yep.
I was there in Cleveland when the team got suspended. I was there. He got suspended because he did the Vince Carter that he did like this, and he didn't dunk it. He was so high up in the air when he did it, his forearms hit the rim, and he pushed it in with his fingertips.
Wow.
We had never, and this kid got another year of high school.
He was,
and he had, when he did that, it went around the world. And that's how they got suspended, because kids were always coming to play with us in different places. I played against Kobe one-on-one every day when I was in Philadelphia.
Really?
Yeah. Team never got suspended. You know what I mean?
I forgot that he would have been in high school then. Yeah, you're right at that time.
So, it's happened, but he did something so phenomenal. We had seen Vince Carter do it. This kid did it, and he's going to the 12th grade against pros. He was ready for the NBA. He would have been an NBA All-Star his senior year in high school.
Yeah, you're right. He should have been one his freshman or as first year in Cleveland, but they, I know they weren't going to take him. But I don't know how the rules went, but he was just right off the bat that first year, because I went to a couple of the games here in Cleveland. I think he had like 40 some points against the Nets, and the Nets has a pretty good defensive team back then. And he put up 40 something like nothing, and he almost had a triple double. And I'm like, everyone here is like, wow. Because we didn't know, we didn't know he was going to be a bust. You never know. I mean, is this kid overrated? Now, we saw him here, so most people in Cleveland loved him, and we thought, okay, this kid's going to be great. But you always have that doubt, because you had Carmelo in that draft, who just coming off a national championship. You had some other great players. So we're like, after that first season, there was no doubt. And we knew that. I mean, you couldn't talk to anybody here that had any doubts about it. Like, yeah, this kid's phenomenal. We knew that. Yeah. But he, right away, that first game.
What about that fourth quarter against the Pistons?
Oh, I mean, that to this day, I think I don't think I've ever seen a performance. I mean, was 25 straight points, whatever it was unbelievable. And that was, to me, that was when he looked like MJ. That was one of the games I thought that looks like an MJ performance. I mean, just taking over the game. And that was, remember that the Pistons, that was no slack of a team back then. I mean, they had a hell of a, you had Rip and those got Tayshaun Prince, and they couldn't do anything about him, and it's not
here's the $1 million question. He showed that he could be like MJ. He showed that he could take a game over and score all the points in the world. He's shown it over and over and over. Somewhere along the line, he decided there's a better way to win. That's a good point. Better way to win, and there's less stress on me. I can do all this and get guys wide open, let them hit the shot.
Mm-hmm. I think that, Willie, that's a great point. I think that's when he made that his mindset. And especially when he came back to Cleveland the second time. And, if you look at that game 7 against Golden State, Kyrie hit the big shot to win it, but LeBron did all the dirty work, the block shot. I mean, he kind of kept him in it. And then Kyrie hit the big shot, and that was it. And that was, but LeBron is the one that he was always the glue. But, he let Kevin Love get his shots. He let Kyrie get his shots, J.R. Smith get his shots. But he was the one that kind of kept it together, and then that block shot, of course, we all know how historic that will go down as. But you're right. That's a great point. Until he started getting other guys truly involved, and I think at times when he was younger, he tried to do that, but then he would just take over. But when he got to Miami and then back to Cleveland, he realized, especially early on in the game, I got to get these guys hot now because I want to have them involved later on. So he would get the J.R. Smiths and those kind of guys involved early, and then he would take over maybe at a certain quarter. But he was never. You're right, and I think people give him flack about not being an MJ type of at the end of games, but he's hit a lot of big shots. People don't realize how clutch LeBron has been in some ways. I mean, he's hit a lot of big shots.
As I think about this, as I think about it, when we say all-around players and we say Big O and LeBron, we forget about Scottie. I forgot about Scottie.
Yeah, and Scottie.
Because Scottie didn't have 20 assists or 15 assists or 17 assists. Those are the three. And I think Big O is last on that list.
Because Scottie was bigger, but Scottie was bigger and can probably do a little more than Big O. And Big O was phenomenal.
Big O will be last on that list, and I think right now Scottie will be first.
And why do you say that?
Think about it. Well, Scottie's got 6. Scottie should have had 7 in Portland.
That's true.
They went a whole quarter with a 20-point lead and couldn't score. Are you serious?
And Steve Smith, and they had that Portland team. I always say that Willie, that was one of the greatest teams not to win a championship. It was Sabonis and Steve Smith and Rasheed Wallace and Pippen, and they were loaded. Damon Stoudemire, and you're right, and they just imploded in that fourth quarter.
All they had to do was win that game, and they won it.
Yep.
They let them win that one, and then they went and won it. I think they won. They were like 2 games back, a game and a half, 2 games. They were, and then LA turned around and won it. LA wouldn't let them go back to Portland because Portland had a better record than LA. LA had to close it out in LA. They let them win that one, and they closed it out there. So they won 2 in a row to get it. And they had a 20-point lead with a quarter left. 20-point lead.
I don't know how I'll never forget watching that game. And we all know the iconic Kobe to Shaq alley-oop, but before that, if you saw how it was just, I've never seen anybody implode like that. And they, with all the great players they had, it wasn't like that. I mean, they had multiple guys that could take over a game or they could hit a big shot, but they just couldn't get their offense going.
So what do you equate? LeBron's been there, what, 8 times, 7 times, 8 times?
Been to the finals 10. Yeah, I think it's 10 times, and he's 4-6.
Okay, he's been to the finals 10 times. So that denotes a winner. But what's more important, going to the finals 10 times or winning it 6?
I mean, I'll tell you what, it's tough because I know most people are going to say winning 6, obviously, because you want to win more. But I'll say this, and I'll stick up for LeBron from the Cleveland standpoint, is that he brought a lot of teams to the finals that should never have been to the finals. Teams that would probably wouldn't have won 20 games if it wasn't for him. That 07 Cavs team, no disrespect to some of the other guys in that team, but he had no other Robin, not even. I mean, Larry Hughes and Big Z, we love Big Z here. We had, Daniel Gibson, Boobie Gibson, a couple, but there was really nobody in that team that, if you took LeBron off that team, they don't win 15, 20 games. So I think that's where that's
a discussion they need to start having. See, when they keep talking about 6, they forget about 10. Try to go 10 times. And just try to show up 10 times. How many games do you have to win to go 10 times?
Exactly. And Willie, he won 8 times in a row in the East. And I know people say, well, he was on that loaded Heat team, but still, to get there, and they say the East was weak. You hear all the people make these excuses, but I don't care how.
Everybody got an excuse when you win, man.
They do.
I mean, listen, nobody's going to love you. They're always going to find out something. They're going to say, I mean, it's Mike, or if he didn't have Kerr, or if he didn't have Hodges. It's all of this. It's always going to be the way. But the bottom line, would I rather have 4 and have gone 10 times, or would I rather just say I only went 6 times?
I mean, me personally, I'd rather have the 6 just because Jordan and Pippen were 6-0, and I'd rather have that. But if you look at it from a historic standpoint, I mean, going 10 times, that's, I mean, it's like Tom Brady. Tom Brady won. I think he won 10 times as well. He's won 7, but I mean, it's like Joe Montana only won 4 times and he won all 4 of them, but he didn't go 10 times like Tom Brady. So I don't know. That's a great. I mean, I think it depends who you talk to. I'll stick up for LeBron because I know people rip him on those 6 that he lost. A couple of them you can say, yes, that was more on LeBron. But there were 3 or 4 of those that he had, like Kyrie and Love were injured that first time against Golden State. They had no chance without Kyrie and Love. You have to have another all-star or 2 to beat that team. LeBron still took them to 6 games, but pretty much just LeBron. And, and then in 2007.
Again, so again, there's another example of he can do things that Jordan has done if he's put in that position.
It's true. Yeah, you're right. He could change his game. You're exactly right. And I think that's always the question people have about Jordan is it could have, and I think we all know he could have, but could Mike have changed his game to, hit the 3-pointer or, maybe been more of a distributor if it called for that, depending on the era he played. And I think we all would say yes, because it was MJ and he would adapt to anything, but we never really, MJ never really had to do that necessarily because, he was in a different era. So could he have hit that 3? I mean, LeBron developed a 3-point shot over time. He was not a good 3-point shooter early in his career, if you remember, not at all. And he developed that shot over time. And he's not a great 3-point shooter, but he's good enough where they have to respect him.
I don't think, this is me, and I love Mike. Mike's game is focused in a certain way. He plays in a certain style. If you look at college, because college will show you if you have the ability to do that. If he did that in college, then you could say he could do what LeBron does. I'm not sure Mike can do that. I'm not sure. I'm not saying no, he can't, but I'm not sure he can play like LeBron and be as successful because Mike is an assassin. That's who he is.
You're right.
He was born to do. That's who he is. That's what he loves to do. And he's the best assassin, hands down. Assassin, just straight out, The ball is in his hands. You walking out the arena. For 10, 15 years, when the ball was in his hand and the game was on the line, you left the arena. You can go get your parking because you know he gonna hit the shot. If you're a away team, you hoping he missed, but you gonna hear on TV, oh, he made it.
It's true.
But to do all of what LeBron does, the way he does it, Mike is not that big either, too.
That's
LeBron can't guard 1 through 4.
No question. And even 5 at times.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mike is he's really 1 through 3, possibly, depending on how smart the 3 is that he's playing against, what kind of skills he has. Because one of Mike's greatest weakness inside was size. A lot of people never realize that. I never understood why that. We did it all the time. Down there, I get Mike on the block, forget the play, give me the ball. You know what I mean? No teams ever did that. I never could understand why they did that.
Yeah, I wonder what
why
reason.
They didn't do that.
Yeah, I don't get that either. I mean, you think they would have. I mean, you said that's the one game that part of his game that wasn't a strength necessarily.
I want you to run that play on your podcast and show what I'm talking about when Steve Smith got on the block, spun around on him, and dunked over him.
I will.
6'8", big guy. That was his weakest. I ain't gonna say he was weak. I'm not gonna say that at all. That's not what I'm trying to say. But that wasn't his strongest point. His block defense against bigger players.
I mean, this is really great insight because I never really thought about that aspect of his game. And you coming from
nobody did.
No, nobody. I never heard
these guys all pros. They pro coaches. They draw up X's and O's. And they do all of this stuff, and nobody ever thought about posting Mike up and putting him in foul trouble. That's exactly what we did.
No, you're right. That's a great point. I don't know. I wonder I would love to get some other players and ask them what they thought about, what they would think of that, and if they. Because I never heard that before. I've never heard anybody bring it up, and I'm sure it's been brought up at some point, but I've never heard it. And I listen to a lot of different podcasts and things related to the '90s. So, yeah, that's just something you never really hear that part of his game. No one ever talks about that.
And then rebounded or miss shots.
Well,
if you want Mike anywhere on the floor, you want him up under the backboard, wrestling with somebody bigger than he is.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned, Willie, you mentioned LeBron getting back to his size over Jordan. I think that's one of the, and we were talking about, could Jordan do what LeBron did and vice versa? I think there's certain things that Jordan could have done just because it's MJ, and I think he would have figured out a way. But the size, you can't, you are what you are. So he couldn't become 6'8", 6'9", 250. I mean, LeBron's just a specimen. We'll never see. I don't know if we'll ever see anything quite like him again. The way the talent mixed with how big and strong and fast he is. And because there are a lot of guys we've seen who are his size, but they just don't have that talent or they don't have that mindset. LeBron's also very smart. He's a high IQ guy. So he's a high IQ player, and he just knows what to do in certain situations. And I had one of his high school teammates who's a good friend of mine on the podcast, and he played at SVSM with LeBron. And he said, LeBron ruined high school basketball for me because now every time I see a prospect, this big guy coming up, I watch them, and they're good players, but they're not even close to LeBron. LeBron was at a different level. And just like you said, his senior year, he probably could have been an NBA All-Star. And that's the kind of level he was playing at.
He was an NBA All-Star his senior year. I was on the court with him. I saw it. I saw this kid, rarely do you see kids with capes on their back with all the necessary skills. Kobe was still out of control at times, It took him a while to gather himself and get everything together. No, Brown was skills already tight. And he could fly like Superman, and his skills were tight. So he could jump like Vince Carter, but he could play like Michael Jordan. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. And he could pass like Magic Johnson. I mean, he was that dynamic of a passer.
Pass like Magic Johnson. He can rebound he could do almost anything on the floor, man, at that size. It was like, wow, kid, are you serious? This kid is how old? You got to be kidding me. I've never seen a kid like this ever. The closest kid I've seen that was young that shocked me, but he was 6'9" in 8th grade, Josh Jackson.
Remember Josh Jackson? Yep.
In 8th grade, he was 6'9", shooting threes and catching alley-oops. shooting and could put the ball on the floor at 6'9" in the 8th grade.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, freakish is what that is.
He's the greatest 8th grade player I've ever seen.
Yeah, because LeBron at 8th grade, I think he was like 6'2", or so he was smaller than that. He didn't grow until high school, really. He was not, even when he was in high school, really, the early high school, he was like 6'3", 6 feet. He wasn't real tall back then. And my brother saw LeBron in an open gym, Willie. How I found out about him was back in I think it was 99. LeBron was just going in to be a freshman. And a guy up here in Cleveland who ran camps called my brother, because my brother was a big player up here. He said, Brett, you got to come up and see this young kid from Akron named LeBron James. And my brother came up here. I remember I was in high school. I was a sophomore. And he's like, Brad, I'm telling you, this kid's going to be the next Michael Jordan. I thought, give me but my brother's not but Willie, my brother's not a BSer. He's like you. He's a straightforward kind of guy. He's not going to BS you, And I'm like, Brett, he was, I'm telling you, this kid was phenomenal. And he said he was playing against seniors and blocking shots, making no-look passes. And he was like, 6'2", like scrawny little kid. And he goes, he was way above these seniors who were, big 6'4", big guys. And he said he made them look bad. And he was probably 14 or 15. And he said, yeah, this kid's phenomenal. And sure enough, I told my buddies where I was from, they're like, oh, give me a break. The next Jordan. Everyone's laughing. And I said, so sure enough, when he won that championship in 2016, I had friends texting me, dude, I remember when you texted me, 15 years ago, but this kid's going to be the next Jordan. And, he won us a championship. So it was pretty cool. It was like a bittersweet moment. It was a really awesome moment to have that come full circle. But yeah, I mean, Willie, that's why I knew about him when I was real young and before everybody else did, because of my brother, because he was tied into all the coaches and AU camps. And he's like, I'm telling you, that kid from Akron is going to be phenomenal. And sure enough, again, I was even skeptical. I thought, how could this kid be that good? There's just, and he happens to grow up in Akron, right? There's no way. And I mean, I was wrong. Everything I thought, yeah, he's going to be good, but not great. No, he was great. I mean, he still is great. It's unbelievable what he's done in his career. It really is.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Okay. A couple of things I really appreciate doing this and taking the time I could talk basketball with you for hours, but so a couple more questions I have for you. I know you played on the 98 Spurs with a young Tim Duncan, a rookie Tim Duncan. I always wanted to ask you, what was it like playing with a rookie TD? And did you see him becoming the legend that he became?
Without a doubt. I mean, without a doubt. He was what David Robinson needed, to be honest with you. David Robinson was great, but he needed someone else to they need a 1-2 punch. It's hard to be that one big guy without someone else. And this kid was nerves of steel, calm, relaxed. He's a great person too. It was known immediately. This kid was special. He was special, and that really he doesn't need to get any better. He was doing the same things all through the championship. He was doing that his first year. There was a few more things he kind of learned playing against Karl Malone and other things like that. But after that, that was it. That was it.
And do you consider him the greatest power forward ever?
Without a question.
Yeah, I think a lot of people do.
Without question. Karl Malone is a great scorer. He did a lot of scoring. I give that to him. But you're going to talk about total body of work. He got 5 championships, got robbed out of 1. Ginobili would have took a shot.
That's true. Yeah, you're right. He should be 6-0 in the finals.
Yeah. Yep. LeBron should be -1.
Yeah, that's true. You're right.
But that was ridiculous. He didn't have to shoot the ball. What are you doing, dude? Dribble it out.
Yeah, the end of that game was nuts. The last couple minutes of that game was crazy. But Tim, when I look at his body of work, and I it's cool talking to you because you play with a rookie Tim Duncan, a young Tim Duncan. So it just always seemed like he had that aura and that moxie about him. We have a kid in Cleveland named Evan Mobley here, and he has a similar. I mean, he's not. I'm not saying he's Tim Duncan, but he has a very similar. He's going to be a hell of a player, and he's only 20 years old, and he's 7 foot. He could pretty much do everything on the court. He's very calm, and he's the closest thing I've seen demeanor-wise to a big man, to Duncan, coming into the league as a Cavs. I think with him in the lineup are 13-7 this year, and the kid's completely helped change the franchise around. And I look at a young Tim Duncan, and I saw this guy who was just, like you said, nerves of steel, and he never looked rattled on the court. He just looked like he always had it together. He was calm and cool, and then his size. You forget how big he was. He's a 7-footer, and he can affect both. The thing about Tim, to me, is he can dominate both ends of the floor, whether it's offense or defense down low. I mean, he contested so many shots, and he was a smart passer, and he was just everything about him. I loved his game.
Tim was not a great leaper.
No, he
A
wasn't.
lot of people don't know. Tim was not a great leaper. Tim's IQ, his basketball IQ, and his basketball skills. If people talk about skill, everybody talk all this crap about skills. When we talk about skills, you look at Tim Duncan. You talk about skills, just pure skills. He's whooping you, no athleticism, and he's tearing you apart. And he's the leader out there too. And he's not yelling, he's not cursing, he's not hollering, he's not acting a fool, he's just doing what he does.
So when he went on to win all those championships, I'm sure none of that was a surprise to you.
No. You could see the writing on the wall then when he was there with his first year, it pretty much started to split down the middle with David Robinson, started to and Pop started to talk. Pop talked to both of them, and the team basically was around those guys, and that's the way it should have been. He was just doing some incredible stuff. And I'm looking at this rookie like he's giving Karl Malone a business. Karl Malone don't know what to do. Karl Malone, you got to score 39 because he's going to get 25 at least.
Oh, yeah.
But guess what? Your 30 points is only 5 now. So that's what people didn't understand and didn't think about. Karl Malone used to get 30 and his man might get 10, 12, whatever. Because Karl was really physical, try to beat you to death. Tim, as soon as he started muscle, Tim went off the glass. It was just like, Karl didn't know what to do. You know what I mean? I'm just telling you. So he had to keep scoring on this end. He had a young kid that he didn't know what to do with. He's big. He's physical. He's using my body against me.
I mean, when I look back at like that, I think I watched a podcast with Kobe right before he passed away, and he was talking about, everyone asked, well, why don't you and Shaq win more championships? And of course, there's all this, he goes into detail, but he says, I'll tell you what, those Spurs teams and Tim Duncan were really good. He goes, people don't realize how good they really were. And this is Kobe saying that. And he said, you don't underestimate Popovich and Duncan and those guys. He goes, they were really, really good. And he goes, so I don't know if we would have won, all these championships in a row just because of them alone. They're just too good, and there's some years they're going to get you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, you got Timmy. Come on, man. You put the ball in those two guys' hands, and everybody else play off them.
That's pretty much what they did. Yeah. And I think they had Mario Elie, and they had Avery Johnson, some of the other guys, and that Sean Elliott was a good player. I mean, they had a nice squad too that first championship. And they, I had Chris Childs in the show who played for the Knicks, and played him in the. He goes, man, those boys, Duncan and Robinson. He goes, they were a handful. They had a nice team, the Knicks, but Camby and those guys. But he goes, we couldn't.
They played the high-low game, and they made big men look silly. I used to sit there and just like, God, Jesus Christ. And they played so well together. They could just read each other. Tim would get the ball. David was the athletic one to jump up and get the lobs. David step in the lane. He hit him. Or David, he spin around. Tim never really caught lobs. Tim just get the ball and just give you numbers.
Yeah, he was not a flashy guy. Yep.
Yeah, he's just going to give you something, hook off the glass, step back off the glass. He's just going to school you.
Mm-hmm.
And him and David, man, I remember sometimes, man, nobody else touched the ball but them two, sometimes 4, 5, 6, 7 times down the court.
Wow.
And they'd just be eating the big man up. And I would look at their faces, the big men, as they're kicking them in the tail. And they just be looking like, damn, I tried this, that didn't work. I tried that didn't work. I tried this, it didn't work.
And think about it, Willie, you're going against two bona fide Hall of Fame big men, 7-footers. I mean, how do you stop that when you have two? I mean, I don't know. I don't know if there would be an answer to them, because even when Shaq played them, and that's when Shaq was just physically completely dominant, and he had a hard time with the Twin Towers. I mean, that was, yes, he could one-on-one, but when you put them together, that was not. So, yeah.
And they wore him down.
Yep, they did wear him down. Exactly what they did. Yep. Yeah, I always say if I start for me, because I'm a big Dream fan, I always said if I was going to start a team now, I would take Dream at center and Duncan at power forward. I said I'd be just fine with those two guys. How skilled they both are and just everything about them. I said that's who I would take to start. And then you could go with a number of guys, of course, but those two guys are two of the best that I've seen at their position and what they do and how they can affect both ends of the court. Because Dream could defend you. I mean, Dream, I think when he retired, was top 10 in steals in the NBA at that point when he retired, which is crazy as a 7-footer.
Listen. You put a young Lou Alcindor against Dream.
With that hook shot and
just his defense. He was a great defender too. He's 7'2".
Yeah,
Not 7 foot, he's 7'2". He's strong and he's agile. And he could run the floor. Not like a lot of others.
No, you're right. It's a great point.
He could run the floor. Now on offense, he just used that that's just what he used because it was just easy. It was an advantage. That's what he did. But people didn't pay attention to young Kareem on the defensive end.
You're making me think now because I didn't think about that. And he was,
Dream is great. Don't get me wrong. But you got to go look at a young Kareem on the defensive end of the floor. Then compare that to say, because he was agile. Dream may have shook him a couple of times, but Kareem is smart too. Very intelligent player.
What did you think of the combination of Dream and Sampson back in the 80s? Before Sampson got hurt, and of course it didn't really. But for a while there, they even beat Kareem in '86 to go to the finals, and of course the Celtics beat him. But because that was a pretty dynamic duo as well.
If they would have used Popovich method and they would have let those two play, see the other guys are trying to get their shots off too. If they would have just played off of those two, the other guys would have got easier shots. Popovich created a new model with two big men. That's that good. Mm-hmm. Everything goes to them, and you play off of them. Everything.
Yeah, won them multiple championships. Yeah. Yep.
Right.
Yeah, because I look back at all the different big combinations we've seen in NBA history, and I always think Sampson and Olajuwon, no one really talks about it, but they never won a championship together. But they were, that was fairly dynamic. Wasn't Sampson 7'4"? He was a big dude. Yeah.
Yeah. It was a similar type of game. Similar type of players, really. Really, in a way, it was that same model, but it was a different approach.
Okay.
You guys don't do nothing. Get them the ball and play off of them. Let them decide what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't know. I hate to say this. I'm not sure if they would have played as well together as I've seen Tim and Dave. It was like music. I rarely could see them throwing the ball away or making a mistake when they were playing with each other and everybody was playing off of them. They made the decisions. It was like nobody's gonna be able to do anything with them. I'm not playing like this. If David had 4 more years, the league would have been in trouble.
Mm-hmm. You're right. Yeah, he was at the end of his career then, and he still won a couple of championships. Yeah, If he would have been in his prime, watch out. That would have been real scary. And it already was. Mm-hmm. Yep. So, okay, a couple more questions for you. And
I got to get out of here in a second.
Okay, let's do one more. So I ask every guest this question. I love hearing the answer to this. When you look back at your career and your life in general, what do you want people to know about the legacy of Willie Burton?
I don't know that I think the thing that you would know about the legacy about me as a person is that as a person, as a player,
both.
As a person that I give back and help others. And as a player, if the ball hit my hands, it's going to be hard to stop me. The ball hit my hands, it's going to be hard to stop me. I can go left, I had the most 3-pointers, I had the record for the game at 1.2. So I could score. I got outscore on the bench, starting. And I never played for an NBA coach that told me not to shoot the ball. That's even with Popovich. Bobby said, look, I'm going to sit your butt down here. I'm going to sit, because we got Timmy David in there. He did. He sat me. I won a couple games for us, too, because they were off a couple games where I came in and I had the green light. I didn't have to pass. And that was my thing, scoring. That's what I patterned myself on, scoring. And having the skill set to score, not just going up, throwing up crazy shots, but just having an arsenal, a left hand, a right hand, a post game. I could tip the ball in, you know. I could do different things to get points. I didn't need a play. And I didn't look crazy either. Clem Haskins taught me how to score within offense and score within the game. That's where I learned that from. I learned that from Clem Haskins. And you couldn't help as much in the NBA, so it was easier. It was just easier. You got to stay over there. You come over here. Yeah. And they taught me, and this is why I say scoring. Because like I said, after my first two games, I received the double team from that point on. I would have to score as soon as I got the ball in my hand before they could set and see where I am and try to double team me. So I had to, boom, be gone, or catch and shoot. I couldn't play with the ball. Coach Haskins told me any more than 3 dribbles and you're wasting your time. So I mastered the 3 dribble and score. Maximum 3 dribbles. Most of the time I try to do it in 2. Beat the double team.
It worked pretty well for you. That's for sure.
I was blessed, man. I had some great teammates, coaches that allowed me to shoot.
Yeah, you had a real nice career. Yep, and play with you had great teammates, and you had very interesting teams you were on, and and again, I think finishing it off later, playing with a young Tim Duncan. That was not many people can say they play with a young Tim Duncan.
Tim Duncan, Manu Bowl, Dikembe Mutombo, Ronnie Cycli, Sean Bradley, Matt Geiger, John Sally, Terry Davis, Christian Leitner, Grant Long, Witherspoon, Tim Perry, Derek Coleman.
DC.
Yeah, man, I've been blessed. I've been truly blessed. Truly blessed.
Well, Willie, I mean,
I played with some great big guys.
You really did, yeah. And just your career in general. I mean, all the way from high school to win state championships, to go to play with a guy like, for a guy like Clem Haskins, and then to have the NBA career you had. I mean, not many people can say they did what you did. And, that's why it was such a pleasure having you on the show. And I again, watching you as a kid and remembering that 53-point game and those Heat teams, and it's cool to interview guys that I watched growing up. I mean, there's nothing like it, and so it's really cool to have you on the show. And it's really been an honor to talk to you about everything, and, the Detroit days and Clem and NBA days and MJ. And it's been awesome. So I really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you very much. Mm-hmm. I really enjoyed this conversation. This is more of a conversation. And I got a chance to talk about some things from a different perspective. Sometimes people get caught up in their emotions and their egos. I'm not that kind of guy. So no, I try to think balanced and fair, and analyze things so that there's no bias in my discussion. Even though I played, there's no bias in my discussion. You made me think about some things too. Made me think about, Orlando, the Orlando team, some of the battles we had. Those are some classic battles, man. That battle for Florida, I don't think you guys realize how big that was for the state of Florida, Orlando, Miami. It was battle for who's the best team.
Yeah, because they were both expansion franchises back then. Yep.
It'd be sold out. And Orlando was expanding and Miami was growing at the same time. The whole Florida thing was growing. Man, let me tell you something. Woo! You got Penny going against Steve. Look at these names. You got Ryan Shaw. You got Harold Miner, Glenn Rice, Grant Long. And you got Dennis Scott, Nick Anderson. You got Jason Williams. Remember the left hand Jason Williams?
Oh yeah. Yep.
He was a workhorse like Grant. They used to go. Yeah.
Like
Those were some games, man.
And like I said, a lot of legendary names back then. I mean, who end up having great careers with other teams and winning championships and doing all types of stuff. But it was yeah, I'll never forget those days because that's when I was growing up and that's when Sports Center was getting big. And so, there was no social media back then. So me and my friends, we wake up in the morning, you make your, Pop-Tarts, whatever, and you were 10 years old and we watched Sports Center. So we see guys like you. That's all we did. We would go into school, we talk about it. Oh, you see Willie's 53-point game. You see Shaq broke the backboard. You see, that's all it was. So you talk guys my age or older, it's all, I mean, we still reminisce about that stuff.
Yeah, right about that time, media started expanding. You guys started getting closer. It made it more personal, which I thought was a cool thing. I thought it was cool. I thought it was real cool. And you had to da-na-na, da-na-na.
Yeah, I missed those days. Stuart Scott and I miss all those guys. Man, that was just a great era. And I really feel the 90s and especially 80s and 90s, Willie, for the NBA, it blew it up until an international game. It was, it became international at that point. It became just a huge, especially, during the MJ years, of course, that it was just a different feel. And now it's definitely international. I mean, everyone watches the NBA, but back then that was the first era that just kind of blew it up.
Yeah, it was good times, man. I'm glad I had the experience. I really cherish it, but I'm into saving lives now, working with other people and helping others and doing different things now. And unlike most players, I don't miss playing. I don't. I like this thing called life. And it's not because it's bad, something's bad with the NBA. I like this thing called life. Like I can sit down and talk to you. I can go outside and take a walk if I want to. I ain't got Michael Jordan or Reggie Miller. I got to worry about a Read the Scout report. It's great. It was a great experience. It was a great experience and I loved it. And now it's time to turn a chapter and deal with life. And I love it. I really do.
I love that. And you're still young enough to enjoy everything. I mean, you had all those experiences, but yet now you still have plenty of time to enjoy the other parts of your life and to help people and to do what you want to do.
Yeah, that's what I do now. So that's my main thing now. So I'm waiting on the University of Minnesota with my doctoral. I've been accepted to 2 schools already. So I've got 10 curriculums out. I'm appointed by the governor for physical fitness, health, and sports here in the state of Michigan. I've been voted on as a national ambassador to the NFL Hall of Fame Behavioral Health.
Really?
I'm assistant instructor at Wayne State University. I've made use of time off the court that I would have put on the court in other areas.
That's all. I mean, it's fun. I go up to Michigan a lot for work. I live in Ohio. I live in Cleveland, but I go up to Detroit area all the time for work. I have a ton of clients up there. So I'm always in, whether it's Ann Arbor or all parts of greater Detroit, Lansing, et cetera. So I've gotten to know a lot of people in Michigan and, how seriously they take their sports and how, I love it now because they give me hassle about Ohio State and I hassle them about Michigan, but it's just the basketball culture up there and just talking to some of the guys who played in your era. I mean, I'll tell you what, just the amount of talent, like I talked before, it's just unbelievable that came out of Detroit.
You look at Flint too. I mean, Flint unload a whole lot of individuals in sports also, Saginaw, Darwin Ham.
Draymond Green came out of Saginaw. Yep.
Yeah, Draymond Green, and you go to Benton Harbor. A couple came out of there. So they were coming out for a while. But what I learned is that mass of people go where jobs go. Wherever the jobs are, that's where people go. And typically, that's where you find the best athletes. Because it seems like, the numbers go up so high and the level of competition is right there. It's like pressure forges diamonds. That's how the Midwest was: Chicago, Cleveland, Detroit. I mean, Toledo. Mm-hmm. Same thing.
You're right. That's a great point. And I mean, Ohio and Michigan in general, like the sports here, I know in Ohio, it's just as competitive as Michigan. I mean, football, basketball, baseball, you name it. There's a lot of great athletes come out of here. And it's just like Michigan. We see it all the time. And that's why one of the reasons why Ohio State and Michigan always have somebody, not to mention the guys they pull from everywhere else, but just the guys in Ohio and Michigan alone, they have a ton of talent to pull from. So,
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. It's why the Big Ten is always, we got 40 top 20 in football. And I mean, you just look at the numbers where you go, but now it's worse. It's getting worse now because the Big Ten is expanding. And now we're in other sports in the top 10, 5 of the top 10. And you know what I mean? It's becoming such a dominant conference. I don't know where it's going to end or if it's going to end.
I don't know if it will. I don't, not anytime soon, at least, just because I just don't see that happening.
I think they're going to keep, I think they're going to go. If 10 years from now, if they didn't go to 20, it would shock me. Because they went as far, they've gone east and west. I mean, come on, man. They've expanded east and west. It's like only thing left is south.
It's true. You're right. Yeah, the Big Ten.
Everybody else is in between that. If they can, if they have the ability to, they're going to jump on without a question because everything's going to be under this kind of umbrella. Mm-hmm. You got to look how many times we play for the national championship now. Big Ten? Yeah, Big Ten.
Yep. You're right.
So you don't think recruits that's getting overlooked down there in the South not going to end up in the Big Ten?
Oh,
That's what you're seeing now. That's what you're seeing now. So Alabama go get this kid, oh, he's number one. Well, you got 2, 3, 4, 5. Where are they going? They're going all landing around here in the Big Ten.
You're right. And I remember, and last, I'll leave us on this, but I remember just every other in the Big Ten too. Like I remember Minnesota in the late 90s, Bobby Jackson and those guys. And people forget how all these other teams, because Ohio State and Michigan get all the press in the Big Ten most of the time, Penn State, but there were some great teams in other sports with a lot of those other schools. I mean, I remember watching those Bobby Jackson years, and you had 5 or 6 great guys in that team. And that was when I was in high school or, middle school. And there's a lot of teams like that people forget about that were, I mean, you guys are, that was a championship caliber team Minnesota had in that.
For some reason, they always overlook these schools. I don't know why. They keep their focus only on Ohio State, Michigan, and Michigan State.
Yep.
Look at Iowa. Look at Iowa football. Then look at Iowa basketball. I mean,
always solid. Yeah.
But this is like, they only pay attention to the top pinnacle. And then when they run into one of these schools in a non-conference game and they get their nose cleaned, it's like, man, then you realize why the Big Ten is so good, because what gives the Big Ten is Michigan got better playing in the Big Ten. If Michigan would have played in any other conference, I don't know if it would have got better. It got better because it played against the competition. They all got better. They all were forced. I mean, look at Minnesota. Minnesota almost beat Ohio State beginning of the year. Then they turned around and beat Wisconsin. Anybody could go down.
Ohio State.
That's the magic of the Big Ten. You can lose on any given night.
I was going to say that.
No guarantees.
Ohio State just beat Duke, but now I'm scared they're going to lose. You never know what's going to happen next. I mean, because it's just, anything can happen. There is no gimme games. That's one thing I've realized watching Big Ten basketball. You don't go into another place and think, oh, I got this game. Not in the Big Ten. Because I've seen all types of upsets, and I know you have. You experienced them.
Yep. I mean, the Big Ten is no joke.
No, it's not.
The NBA was a step. It's a step above the Big Ten. Don't get me wrong, but it was damn close. That's why, to me, it was easier. Shit, you don't have these zones. Come on, man.
I love it. Yeah, it's a different.
Same players. I'm looking at the same guys. Ramil Robinson went right after me. Terry Mills was there. I mean, it was just like the Big Ten. Everybody was on a team somewhere. We were all seeing each other and all doing well. Mm-hmm. Nobody was a bust.
No, you're right.
So anyway, I got to get out of here. Got to get ready for this next one.
Well, Willie, appreciate it again. And, let's do it again. And I'll let you know when we put this up. But again, man, it's been great talking to you. And it's just an honor to have you on the show and to go over your career.
Well, thank you very much. And because of fans like you to support us, sometimes we get reminded of things we may forget about,
Absolutely.
Sometimes you get older, you get more laid back. I show you all this stuff. So look, there goes some of them.
Oh, let me see that.
My MVP trophies from Minnesota.
I Love it.
My community service award with the Spurs. That's my MVP at point guard back there. Whoa, there's some of my rings that I have up here.
Oh, the Wheaties.
Yeah, that's when I won the MVP at the Classic, Hall of Fame. I got more stuff. Mother doesn't always know. My son went to Michigan State, so that's his degree. He was at Minnesota, but he's going to Texas Tech.
Okay.
That's my certification for NYU. That's my master's degree. I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah, now I can. Yep.
That's my master's degree. That's my certification for NYU. Hold on, let me do this. This get all this money for it. This is the first time I did this to this computer. This way. Sorry, TV people. Oh, hold on, what happened? There it is.
There we go. There we go. Yep.
So here, my grandparents. There goes some heat pictures.
Oh, I love that.
Can you see it?
Yep. I love it. Can you hear me?
Can you see me?
There we go. Oh, you're back. Yep. Okay. You cut
Man,
off.
I pushed the button or something. I was like, that's what I'm saying. I'm learning stuff, man. I got things I don't know how to work, pay all this money for it, don't know how to use it. That's what happened. So all your fans. So up here, along the top, let me not push a button. Along here up the top, you see different awards I got. University of Minnesota degree. There's Clem Haskins.
Clem, that's a great picture.
My freshman year, my teammates, the seniors that I came in with. Let me see.
That's a great picture too.
Let's see how many of us. Only 3 of us played in the NBA on that picture. But I got up here my Gopher Hustle Awards. I don't know if you can see them.
I could see him. Yep.
Yeah. My national certifications for Scholastic Athletic, more Gopher Hustle Awards, more Gopher Awards. But life is pretty cool, man.
Yeah. I love how you keep, I want a room like that someday. I love
Oh, I'm going to show you this. Let me show you this. This is when they retired my jersey at Minnesota. Can you see it?
Oh, yeah. Scroll down, go down a little bit. There we go. Perfect. That's cool. That's really cool.
Yeah. So it's, they go Terry Mills. I'm glad they put one of him and me up there. They go Clyburn. He's from Detroit. So they put some of my Detroit friends on there. From Purdue. Yeah. So it's pretty cool, man.
That's really cool.
Yeah. I'm an old man now, man. Let me not push a button.
Yeah, you're still young. You're not as old as you think.
No, when you have gray hair in your face, you're old, dude.
Hey, I got some gray in my beard. I still feel relatively young.
Yeah, I'm not talking about some. I'm past that point. But let me get off of here, man. It was great speaking with you.
You too, Willie. And we'll definitely keep in touch, and I'll let you know when this airs.
Okay. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right. Take care, Willie. Thanks, man.
You too, bro.
Okay.